Welcome to the Global Journalism Seminars. This is The Briefing. On May 29th, South Africa goes to the polls for its 7th democratic general election. The first was held in 1994, 4 years after the release of Nelson Mandela from prison and the legal abolition of the apartheid system of racial segregation. Since then, the African National Congress, South Africa's legacy liberation party, has won majority representation in 6 consecutive multi-party elections, despite multiple corruption scandals, an energy crisis, failed housing and land reform, weak economic growth, and rising unemployment. Analysts believe this may be the year the ANC loses its grip on power. And with 70 political parties contesting, with no nationally unifying policy issue or candidate on offer, there are concerns the outcome could exacerbate social tensions. We asked our journalist fellows, representative of 9 countries, how significant they thought democratic stability in South Africa was to wider democratic efforts in the continent of Africa. 45% thought it was moderately significant, 33% said it was very significant, and 22% were unsure. Our guest today is Adriaan Basson, Editor-in-Chief of South Africa's largest digital news outlet, News24, an investigative journalist and author of Who Will Rule South Africa. We'll ask him which opposition candidates we should be watching, the role of the nation's news media, and the reporting pitfalls to avoid. That's The Briefing. Let's begin. Hello, and thank you for joining us for another Global Journalism Seminar. We're extremely privileged to be able to take an hour out of Adriaan's day, 2 weeks ahead of such an historic election. Adriaan is Editor-in-Chief of South Africa's biggest digital news outlet, News24. So I imagine life has been just a little bit busy, Adriaan.
Good afternoon, Caitlin and fellows. It's an honor to be with you today. I'm joining you from a warm Cape Town. It's supposed to be winter, but it hasn't really started. Yes, it's a busy time. It's also a time that journalists love. I think all of us will identify with the feeling of election excitement and madness. Nothing like dusting off your old statistics books from the previous elections, getting those results at your fingertips, making sure we've got eyes and ears all over the country. But there's definitely some anticipation in the air of change to come. Not radical change, but some change. Your intro was very good in the sense that you know the ANC is under a lot of pressure, most pressure it's ever been in its history as ruling party of South Africa.
Mm-hmm. Adriaan, I do want to acknowledge that I've been out of the country for 16 years, and my heritage may limit my perspective. So I will get to audience questions as quickly as possible today, but I'm very confident that in you we have an expert with decades of top-tier journalistic experience and a heart for progress. So thank you again, and let's get started with a question kind of inspired by the journalists I've been speaking to. I polled 9 from 9 different countries ahead of this seminar. And I said, would your voting publics be happy with one party in power for 30 years? And 67% said it would never happen here. Regular transition of power is necessary to ensure social unity. And 11% said if they were doing a good job, that'd be okay. And then 11% said, depends on the circumstances. Given the South Africa's unique post-apartheid history and challenges, do you think that this extended period of ANC governance was necessary to ensure political stability and social unity, or has it hindered the development of a more robust multi-party democracy?
Yeah, look, I think it was expected that the ANC would be the governing party for a number of years. The party was by far the largest anti-apartheid movement during the years of exile and struggle. There were other smaller parties as well, like the Pan-Africanist Congress, Zanian's People Organization, and others. But the ANC was by far the largest organization, obviously also supported inside South Africa by the likes of the United Democratic Front, the labor unions under Kusatu, etc. So the ANC was undisputedly the leader of society when it came into office in 1994 under Nelson Mandela. And interestingly, Caitlin, I've recently read that quite a few liberation movements in Africa actually fell out of power after about 30 years in office. And we are at that 30 years mark this year. So I think it's not unexpected that the ANC have finally reached a point where they may dip below the 50% mark. I'm sure we're going to talk a bit about that. But I think the party, there's a lot of debate at the moment going on in South Africa on where the party lost the plot. If you look at the trajectory of the ANC government, the first, I would say, 10 to 15 years was positive, not only in terms of reconciliation, nation building, and building a non-racial society, but also in terms of basic social economic upliftment programs in the form of millions of houses that were built, millions of Black people who never had access to electricity and water got those services. And there was actually also economic growth. So there was an upturn in job creation. This was then specifically under Mandela and then Thabo Mbeki, who succeeded him. But there was a big break in 2007 when Jacob Zuma became president of the ANC. And I think if I had to pinpoint to a specific time when the tide started to turn for the worse, it would be December 2007 in a place called Polokwane in South Africa, where Jacob Zuma was elected the president of the African National Congress.
True that, I don't know if this is urban legend or not, that Zuma, it was kind of agreed in advance as part of the CODESA talks that Zuma would be a candidate.
I haven't heard that one. I know Mandela was quite fond of him during the CODESA talks because being from Zulu nationality, he did present a grouping that wasn't always in control of that province. You might remember that the ANC did not actually win control of KwaZulu-Natal province in the first two elections.
Yeah.
It was run by the Inkatha Freedom Party. So from that perspective, Mandela saw Zuma as an asset, but I'm sure just as shocked as the rest of us when the skeletons came tumbling out.
Is the country ready then for multi-party power sharing if we are going to dip below the 50% threshold?
That's the big question. That's the $1 million question, Caitlin. Look, we've had since 2016, we've had coalition governments at a local government municipal level in South Africa. The earliest example of a coalition government was in the city of Cape Town, even before then, when the Democratic Alliance, which born out of the old Democratic Party, kind of the Liberal Party of South Africa, when they took charge of the city of Cape Town, later on the province of the Western Cape, and is today the second largest party in the country. I think that coalition governments have been rocky and messy in place in South Africa. We've seen, for example, in the city of Johannesburg at the moment that the ANC is in a very fractious coalition with smaller parties. About 6 or 7 small parties make up a coalition where the spoils are shared. You have a mayor of Johannesburg at the moment who comes from a party that had 0.9% of the vote in the local government election in 2021. So it is quite unstable. And that government, by the way, has changed twice already since 2021. So I think the fears and some anxiety exists around the possibility when you have a coalition government that the coalition partners may not be in it for the long haul, may only be there to extract positions and benefits, and may then start as almost as the tail wagging the dog, later on making unreasonable demands. So we've been writing a lot about potential coalition formations. in South Africa that could follow the election. I do believe, and I base this on extensive polling research done by at least 3 polling houses, independent polling houses, as well as just my own sense of reporting and my team's reporting throughout South Africa, the length and breadth of the country, is that I think it will not be a big surprise if the ANC achieves less than 50% of the support. How low will they go? Well, that's the other major question. Some of the initial polling showed them as low as 40%, although I think they've picked up some steam. Their campaign has picked up some steam in the past 2 weeks specifically. And you've seen some of those polls, they've been tracking up to around 44-45% of the support again. So at this stage, 2 weeks before the election, it seems to me like we could end up with a situation where the ANC would need around 5 to 6% support from other parties to have Ramaphosa elected again as president.
Maybe the more pertinent question for this audience is, are South Africa's newsrooms ready for this moment? And maybe you could talk to us a bit about what's changed in the past 30 years and what's being done to ensure fair and balanced coverage.
It's a strange world we're living in. In the past few weeks, we've rolled out kind of the largest data reportage we've ever done on election results, and at the same time, we had to buy bulletproof vests for our reporters in KwaZulu-Natal because of the threat of violence, which is expected to be the worst since the late 90s. So it is a strange time for newsrooms where, there's so much more technology and data tools available for us to analyze and present our election results. And that's massively exciting for a news site like News24. We've partnered with a election statistician who has built a prediction model. So we might be able to kind of do some projections during the first 24 hours of the election based on a turnout model. And that will feed into our coverage, which is hugely excited. We strongly believe in ground-up reportage, so we will have reporters on the ground on the election day all across the country. But I can kind of confidently say we are also the leaders in reporting the election results. We have a very popular maps portal where we show the results on a map, where people could put in their addresses and look for the results of their voting district, as well as their province and the country at large. But in terms of the winds of change, I think our political team is preparing to have to deal with probably a bit of a larger group of political actors, specifically in the coalition forming. That's going to be a new thing for us. Our constitution, Caitlin, says that the president must be elected 2 weeks, 14 days after the election has been declared, which is ridiculously little time. And I actually spoke to someone the other day who was involved in the writing of the constitution. And they said they just never expected this to happen. They just never expected a party, and then obviously at the time the ANC, never to dip below 50%, where you had to put together coalitions. It was just not part of the framework, the mindset of the time. We've also heard a number of times during the Zuma years that the constitution was written with Mandela in mind as president. The removal of a president was the furthest thing from their mind. But having said that, so I think we're starting to imagine scenarios of how this could play out in those 2 weeks after elections, and that's going to be a new field of reporting for us. Is how do you report on coalition discussions and negotiations in a way that is unfortunately not that transparent. So we don't have a framework where parties must openly declare that they are in consultation or in negotiations for coalition forming. We don't have legislation that requires coalition agreements to be published or to be publicly available. So we're going to have to be trailblazers in that regard, in covering that coalition forming using our network of sources, informants, and then obviously getting official updates from the political parties themselves. But it is certainly going to be interesting. And the possibility, I don't think, is off the table that come the 14 days when they all the elected members of parliament come to Cape Town for swearing in, that a coalition agreement is not in place, and where the outcome of the presidential vote is completely unknown before they take the oath.
Yeah. Do you think there needs to be legislation after this election is done to require disclosure of consultations like this?
Absolutely. I've done a bit of studying into coalition models. We visited Germany 2 years ago, and I've also read up on other countries' coalition formations. And it does seem to me that it's incredibly ambitious to think that parties could do this in 2 weeks. In certain European countries, as you guys would know, it took months, even 2 years. So I think that we are naive to think it could be done so quickly. And there's obviously the threat that it is then all about power, and actually not about delivery and about governance and policy. So, you know, if those negotiations take place late at night, you know, what will be the depth of discussions around policy? What will be, you know, what will be the alignment on service delivery, on focus areas? We have a massive poverty and unemployment problem in South Africa. We saw yesterday that our statistics is up again to 39.2% unemployment of our adult population. How are parties going to agree in 2 weeks on their approach to that? It seems so ambitious and almost undoable. So I think it's a new experience for all of us. But hey, maybe the ANC surprises us and gets to 50% on their own, and then all of this is just hot air.
A moot point, yeah. What you've already mentioned the kind of threat of violence, and the fact that there are no laws requiring transparency. Have you paid some thought to kind of the threshold for speculation for your outlet? And do you think others need to give attention to that, given that it could fuel violence?
Sorry, Caitlin, can you just repeat that question?
Yeah, sure. Have you given thought to the threshold for speculation about what negotiations might be happening? Like, where's the line for what information you're willing to publish?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, so former President Zuma, for those who may not know, is in the running again for a different party. It was a major political development in December last year when he's now on trial for corruption. As you know, he's been kicked out of his party, and he was kicked out of the presidency in 2018, and he was deeply implicated in state capture and corruption. He then went to form his own or join a new political party called the Umkhonto weSizwe Party. Umkhonto weSizwe was the armed wing of the ANC during the struggle, so it was quite cheeky of him to take that brand, which is closely aligned to the ANC's own legacy and history. But he started a new party called the Umkhonto weSizwe Party, or as we refer to it as MKP, and they were polling at almost 10% when they just launched because of this persona, which is Zuma. It's very interesting that he still has large-scale appeal, specifically in KwaZulu-Natal province. You know, this threw a spanner in the works because Zuma takes votes directly from the ANC, and he's now positioned himself in opposite to the ANC. So he's contributing actively to the demise of the party that he led for almost 10 years. And we are in this unique situation now where, people are asking, is it even thinkable for the ANC to go into coalition with Zuma, who's their declared foe at the moment, if they reach that point? I think in terms of what to report or not, I always err on the side of transparency and complete openness. So unless there's a very good reason to hold back information, I can't see us doing that easily.
This is a very good point to bring in a question from Rowan Phillip, who said, investigative journalists helped save democracy with Gupta leaks in 2018. I think you played a role in that. Can they play a similar role to preserve it, and how?
Yes, hi, Rowan. Nice to see your name. Absolutely. I'd love to receive a set of a data leak anytime soon if you guys know people.
So we'll put your email address.
I think we all, that's any journalist's dream, is to receive a data set that kind of topples a government. In a way, I guess it's a kind of a once in a lifetime thing that happens to journalists, but who knows? I mean, we have certainly played in our own way a role in exposing and in keeping people to account. Just in the past few months, to give you an example, we at News 24 have exposed the lavish lifestyle of the Deputy President Paul Mashatile, who was elected in December 2022 as Deputy President of the ANC. He was a politician from Gauteng, in the ANC in Gauteng, and he lives a incredibly lavish lifestyle that cannot be funded by his own income as a politician. And we have revealed over the past few months, our investigations unit has revealed how a array of business people, many of them implicated in corruption and state capture, are funding his lifestyle through making available expensive mansions to him, etc. And that their companies are benefiting from, or have benefited from, Gauteng housing projects. So I think, we still have a small but strong pool of investigative journalists in South Africa who can write what we like. And we are doing exactly that.
Good. I ask this question with a lot of grace because I know there's the journalistic mission of having an informed electorate, and then there's the journalistic mission of surviving to tell the news another day. So I know that News 24 has a paywall strategy. Is there any thought paid to what goes outside the paywall during the election?
Yes, so just for those who don't know, we have a freemium model at News 24. We started with the majority of content being free, and we swapped around after it went well, and we saw appetite from our readers to pay for journalism. We now have about, I would say, around 30% of our content is still free to view to any reader. This includes breaking news content, so that will typically include election results. News about election violence or election risk will be free. And we actually had a meeting with, as a team about this a few days ago, and we decided to, for that week of elections, the last week of May, we will open up many of our election content that would previously not have been locked. This is obviously not something unique to us. The New York Times, the Washington Post have all done this before, and others, I'm sure. Just as a public service, as a public good, we have I think we have a very affordable subscription rate. Obviously not to all South Africans. Many South Africans are unemployed, and a new subscription is the last thing from their mind. But at least for the kind of chattering classes, the middle classes, who in a previous life have bought a newspaper, I think our subscription cost is really affordable. So we hope that people will still take up the opportunity, maybe be exposed to our content during elections, but then join us as a subscriber afterwards. But as you say, Caitlin, this is very much an era where those two things, where you're constantly battling with that mission of wanting to show everyone your content, specifically if you worked in the internet for many years, because that was the rule of the internet, right? Until a few years ago, it was that everything was free, which didn't really help our businesses. It helped Google a lot. But we are now at a point where we simply cannot continue with that model. We have to charge for our journalism and specifically exclusive stuff. But the daily reportage on elections, election results, election violence, disinformation, we also have a disinformation desk for the election. I mean, their content will be free as well.
Good. Love that. And then just one more question from me before we go downstairs and to the Q&A. South Africa's had quite a colourful foreign affairs past 12 months, 24 months, with taking Israel to The Hague, with meeting with Russia, trying to negotiate there. Do you have any sense that this foreign policy has influenced voter sentiment in any way?
So what I'm picking up is that the Israel conflict in Gaza has been an interesting one that has definitely divided voting communities. So the ANC has been very outspoken in support of Palestine and took the plight of the Palestinian people to the International Court of Justice. At the time, there was actually interesting discussion and debate around, you know, whether this was an attempt by the ANC to almost go back to their days of moral leadership, where many people would argue that they've lost that in the past 30 years with scandals like the arms deal, the Zuma presidency, the years of state capture, etc. It kind of felt like an old ANC thing to do, the right thing to do, you know, like something like that Mandela would have done. And then there were others who obviously the critics of the ANC said it was an opportunistic move to achieve that and to hope that people would ignore the ANC's failure as governing party and failure in terms of service delivery. To come back to your question, I think we have quite a sizable Muslim voting population based specifically in Cape Town and Gauteng, scattered all over the country, but particularly large in those two provinces. I haven't picked up that there was this like a clear homogeneous sympathies with the ANC because of that position. In fact, I read a comment piece not too long ago from a Muslim writer who said, you know, the ANC mustn't think we are stupid. We still live in South Africa and we feel their dire service delivery record. And we won't just vote for you because you went to the ICJ. So that sentiment is real, but they might have won some support. I don't think significant. I don't think it's going to change the election. No, definitely Ukraine, Russia, definitely not. And Israel, maybe slightly. The main opposition party, the Democratic Alliance, is perceived as more pro-Israel. So, you know, they may have lost some of their support, but not to an extent that I think would majorly influence the result.
Good. Let's pop down stairs now to Debui, Samuel Thomas. I know you've got some questions about coalitions.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, all right. Yes, thank you for this wonderful insight. And while you were making your remarks, I was just reflecting about Nigeria's past election and looking at the number of political parties so far in South Africa, and with the DA and the EFF as major political parties. What is the possibility of these major parties like opposition to merge to confront ANC? Because I am not seeing the possibility of a single party emerging to defeat, and with this proliferation of other political parties, is saying that they are going to divide votes among them. So is there any sign that these major opposition parties could like merge to confront the ANC? Yes, and that is one. And if there is possibility, what is the electoral revolution like saying about the time frame for merging and the time frame for candidates to collide and confront at the polls? That is one. In the last election in Nigeria, social media was used as a tool for a promotion of hate speech, particularly among major political parties. What is the atmosphere like now in South Africa as the election approaches?
Good question.
Thank you for that. Absolutely, on the first question, absolutely valid point that the two main opposition parties, which is the Democratic Alliance and the EFF, that stands for Economic Freedom Fighters, who is a more radical, socialist-orientated party, both of them have failed to capitalize significantly on the ANC's loss of power. So you will probably see that the ANC drops 10 percentage points or more from their result in the 2019 election, but that 10% was not absorbed by these two parties. They have failed to capitalize on it. It's other smaller parties that will pick it up. So you have a fragmentation of politics in South Africa with these smaller parties. We did see for the first time during this election campaign some opposition parties coming together under the banner of the Multiparty Charter. So what's interesting about that is this is the Democratic Alliance, the official opposition. They are on around 20% of the national support, 21%. Them plus the number five biggest party, or the fourth biggest party, as well as 3 or 4 of the smaller parties. They have come together under a banner, and their campaign has been one where they positioned themselves as an alternative government. But of course, they couldn't join forces with the EFF because the EFF is too radical for them, and their policies do not agree at all. So you still have, and this formation, I believe, will not get to 50%, not even close. So yes, you're quite correct. There isn't a solidified opposition that could defeat the ANC. I think what we're looking to now is if the ANC doesn't reach 50 and the result is in the low 40s, they are going to need quite a few parties to reach a majority and to get their presidential candidate elected. And that might require some concessions from the ANC, which will be very interesting to follow. On your second question around social media, we've had a problem with hate speech, specifically on X, for the past few years. Journalists are still being targeted on Twitter or X on a daily basis. In fact, I have said to my newsroom that it's completely up to them whether they even want to have a presence on that platform, because I don't believe that it's necessarily good for journalists to be there. It's very different now than what it was 10, 15 years ago, when it was actually a robust, healthy, and interesting space for debate and information sharing. It's really become quite toxic in South Africa, specifically that platform. So we have seen attacks on journalists. Specifically, the supporters of the EFF, this radical party that I mentioned, they are quite active on X, and they use the platform to promote their own views and attack those who don't agree with them. We haven't seen a large-scale social media disinformation campaign at this stage that I can pinpoint to say, there's a large-scale campaign targeting party X or Y or Z. What we have seen are random things happening. So just to give you an example, I said that former President Zuma started a new party called the MKP. Now, shortly after they launched, we saw that there were people posting posting for them on X from Russia and Belarus. Now, this was interesting because obviously we all know that, the Russian government has a tendency of trying to influence elections outside the country. So it was interesting to see that there's some Russian links to their social media presence, but it hasn't been so overwhelming, so in your face that it's like a tangible aspect that could change the elections. Not from what I've seen. We have, as I said, we have a disinformation team. Well, it's not a team of people who only do that. They also have other jobs, but they're very passionate about disinformation and misinformation. So they have come together for the election, and they monitor these platforms on a daily basis.
That's excellent. I'm going to go to Ingeborg from Norway next, on the other side of the room.
Hello, thank you for your insight. I work in the labor union press in Norway, and for the largest union. And they traditionally support the Socialist Party, the Labour Party in Norway. But I'm wondering why the Congress of South African trade unions are so strong in backing the ANC, while they still complain about not being given any attention between the elections.
Yeah, that is true. Kusatu still is a strong supporter of the ANC. I think the opposition parties have not managed to capitalize on labor, have not managed to get trade unions on their side. We did see one of the former Kusatu leaders, as well in Zuma, break away to start his own trade union federation called SAFTU. But they are not aligned to a political party, and they are not at the same size or quantum as Kusatu is. So what we have at the moment is the ANC is still strongly supported by Kusatu and their affiliated unions. The biggest union is now the Teachers Union, the South African Democratic Teachers Union. And they are known to be very valuable for the ANC during election campaigns, in terms of their proximity to election centers over the country, their ability to campaign in communities. That relationship still is strong. I do think while they haven't broken away from the ANC or joined another party, what we have seen is people just withdrawing their support for the ANC or not campaigning as a protest vote. So that has been a phenomenon since 2016, is that ANC voters don't necessarily go out and vote for another party, but they withdraw their vote. They withhold their vote for the ANC, and they don't participate in elections.
Adriaan, I've got a series of questions from an anonymous attendee, and I think some of them you're used to answering, and all of them are worth asking, just for the value of transparency and potentially to address disinformation. The first one is essentially questioning how News 24 can be considered impartial given its history as being owned by Naspers, which was essentially an agency that propped up apartheid to a large extent.
Yeah.
How have you grappled with that history?
Yeah. No, sure. It is well known. It's not controversial. I mean, the company, the mother company, has transformed tremendously. It's now a global tech company with its largest assets or investments in Chinese tech companies. It's based in Amsterdam. We are a very small affiliate now of Naspers. We are in a company called Media 24 that is the largest media company in South Africa that owns a number of newspapers and websites. the company have been very open and honest about its past and history, and has done a lot over the past 30 years to change, invest in new forms of media. This company called Media24 owns, for example, the largest daily newspaper read by Black readers called the Daily Sun. We have by far the largest digital followers on our digital platforms, and successive CEOs of Media24 has apologized publicly for the role that the company played before 1994. The company, I am very comfortable working in the company. We have a complete diverse staff, board, management, and we do good journalism. That's all we focus on. So I guess it's not unlike many other media companies in the world with checkered pasts. But essentially the question for me is always, can I do my work without fear of failure today with the resources available? And the answer to that is yes.
If the answer to that was ever no, would you still be there?
Oh, no, I wouldn't work for any. I mean, we unfortunately at the moment have a media house in South Africa, one of our competitors, who is completely aligned to a specifically ideological faction in the ANC. And I couldn't work in such an environment. I just couldn't, no.
And then the next part of their question surrounds criticism of your coverage of Israel prior to 2023, that at least 2 of your journalists and editors went on a propaganda junket to Israel, sponsored by the Zionist Federation. And have you ever gone on any SA Jewish Board of Deputies or Zionist Federation sponsored trips?
No. It's a pity that this person didn't put their name, just to have a sense of where they're coming from. But look, no, I mean, I've never been. I don't know, what would be the purpose of a question like that. Our journalists go on a lot of press junkets to Israel and other countries in the Middle East and elsewhere. And going on a press junket doesn't mean that your brain gets replaced with a propaganda. Sometimes it's the best type of journalism is to go see for yourself. I remember, in fact, one of my colleagues who went before 7 October last year, probably 2 or 3 years ago, went on a trip to Israel, specifically went on his own into Gaza after the official Israel leg of the trip. So I don't have any issue with that. I think our coverage has been good. I think we were one of the only media houses who sent journalists to the ICJ. It's been tough to cover the conflict. It's far from South Africa, physically removed, but close to home, because we have sizable communities in South Africa who strongly sympathize with both sides in the conflict. And it's I'm sure you guys have spoken about it at length, but it's always tough to make sure you keep balance, you stay true to the facts, and that you trust your partners, because we obviously we're not in a position to send our own journalists into the conflict, so we rely fully on the likes of Reuters, AFP, and Al Jazeera, who we have partnerships with, to use their content on our platform, to make sure that you give a hearing to all sides, and then also in the opinion section. We were quite strong, just maybe a last comment on that, we were quite strong in our opinion section of not allowing any false news, misinformation, disinformation. So we went through a rigorous check, more than usual, for opinion pieces, specifically when it came from the Jewish Board of Deputies or from parties affiliated with Hamas or with the Palestinian state.
Thanks, Adriaan. I really appreciate you answering those. A question from Hafez, which I think is lovely and really just encapsulates what we're trying to achieve today. What defines a good journalist during election coverage under the country's conditions? And what are the challenges that might face journalists in the coverage of the upcoming election?
Thanks, Hafiz. I think nerves of steel. You don't need a lot of sleep. I think what I like about elections is it's a period of change. It's a period of possibility. Any party literally for 24 hours can win the election, and I mean there's so much potential in an election campaign. I think that a good journalist, it also depends on what you're covering. So if you're covering election day, I expect our journalists to go out to polling stations, to speak to an array of different diverse people in the polling queue, around the polling station, to party agents from all the parties on the floor. When someone makes a claim of irregularity or something that election fraud, to interrogate that, not to just report that. That's quite big for us, since people are now seemingly free to make ridiculous claims. We can't just uncritically report that. We have to fact check them first. That's what we try to do, and then to report as they would on any other story with balance and fairness. I think that's the most we can expect of them. When it comes to election results, like I said, we have quite a strong team of data experts this election, and we will again, with circumspect and with the necessary patience, and not rush into reporting around results, specifically around projections. We will take our time in putting out stories that we believe points to a very specific outcome of a result. So there, I think what is required is a cool mind, is a analytical skills to grapple with the results, to be able to access historical election results in your reporting, to give context, and then obviously not to to be smart when you work with percentages, and go back to the raw numbers and explain what those percentages mean. Percentages, as we know, can be very misleading.
Let's pop downstairs one more time to Osama from Iraq.
Hello, thank you very much for this presentation. My name is Osama from Iraqi Kurdistan.
Sorry.
I've got two questions. The first question is about the coalition formation. I know, like you said, you've got some idea about what is going to happen. You said you want to have some preparation in terms of in the newsroom, you expect some balance to happen. Bulletproof vest, which is to me okay, you've got some perhaps real indicators that something is going to happen. So I'm not saying South Africa is similar to Iraq, very much different historically and everything, but still we also have this kind of lengthy coalition formations, during which definitely there are times that are going to be balanced, and it takes time, month, and I think you also said some places it takes years. We used to have the largest party, once they landed the second time, the largest party, all of their MPs had to resign because of some trouble, some balance. So, and of course you're talking about 14 days, being ridiculous, and you like to prolong it. But does that mean, if this formation is going to continue, as I've seen in my country, is it going to be peaceful this period, so that during this period of formation, and what is the process like? Do you think there is going to be some balance as they're going to form the new government? And second question, I think you also touched on Israel-Palestine conflict. Malema, I think it was Malema who said the US backlash on South Africa's stance is going to bring some like economic impact on South Africa. So he was fearful, like, what if the US is going financially to punish the South Africans? And does that, if that is the case, does that mean like it's gonna impact the voters? Not in terms of like who they support, but it's like if that's the case, how the voters are going to feel the impact of like some form of like US measures against South Africa. Of course, if that's true, it was Malema who said in one interview. Thank you.
Let's, Adriaan, steer clear of the, I don't want to speculate too much about violence, because I think that could be a pitfall. But let's address preparations for journalists and Malema's.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Look, I mean, just in terms of preparation, so when we had our first elections in 1994, the years preceding that was unfortunately very violent and bloody in KwaZulu-Natal province, where there's fierce competition between the ANC and the IFP. So in this election, you have another party, which is Jacob Zuma's party, contesting in that region, and lots of those campaigns will be along ethnic lines. And there may be some ethnic support for them. So we have to be prepared. My colleagues and people I speak to in the region said that the tension is quite high. So we are, as a precaution, making sure that our colleagues who have to go into areas where there may be election violence, as a precaution, we've made sure to acquire vests and things like that. And press, jackets and things. Look, preparing for this is always hard. The best you can do is make sure you have a range of sources. We also have election observers from across the world during our elections who are quite handy and useful in alerting us in the media when there are tensions or potential election fraud. I don't expect any large-scale national outbreaks of violence or protests around the election results. South Africans, by and large, have always accepted the election result, even when their party loses. And our elections agency is really, really excellent in their work. They are one of the best globally. They have many professional engineers, auditors, lawyers working inside that organization, and there's absolutely no reason to doubt the factuality or the correctness of the election results. Just moving on to the US backlash. Look, it didn't happen. I mean, the AGOA was extended, and I think South African foreign policy is a whole different discussion on its own. But we always walk that tightrope of not wanting to offend anyone too massively, and be friends of everyone, which obviously isn't always possible. And I mean, it was odd for South Africa to take such a hard line on Israel because previously we didn't arrest al-Bashir from Sudan when there was an arrest warrant out for him. We were probably not going to arrest Putin if he came out while there was an arrest warrant. So we don't want to be seen as a strong player against any global country. Israel was really it was a unique situation where the country took a strong position globally. And I think, I don't think the backlash has really transpired, or the feared backlash has transpired. I think the US also realizes that they need South Africa, and that South Africa is still an important strategic place for them. And relationships between Pretoria and Washington does seem to have stabilized over the past 2 months or so.
I'm going to end off with a question from Isatu Sar, but I'm going to slightly paraphrase Isatu. Essentially, what are some of the investigative journalism efforts that people should Google out of South Africa that have led to significant reforms, policy changes, or legal actions aimed at safeguarding democratic principles. Obviously, Gupta files.
Sure, there's a whole list over the course of
there is
years.
a big list.
You know what I will do, Caitlin, is I'll send those links to you.
Amazing.
I think that I'm so proud of our journalists. I mean, so we have a very proud tradition of investigative journalism through apartheid years, publications like the Weekly Mail, South, the Vrye Weekblad, and others were a pivotal part of exposing the dirty tricks campaigns of the National Party. And that proud tradition of investigative journalism has continued post-democracy. Just a few years into democracy, some of the first scandals of the ANC's corruption was published by the likes of the Mail and Guardian, which was the successor of the Weekly Mail. I worked there in 2007 for 3-4 years, and I mean, we covered the arms transaction with a number of European arms companies. We covered the corruption of our former police commissioner, who became the president of Interpol, who went to prison for corruption. We've uncovered something called Oilgate, which was a corrupt transaction which benefited the ANC through a oil purchase by the South African Petroleum Agency. And I can continue. Jacob Zuma's corruption linked to the arms deal and others. So yeah, there've been many examples of good investigative journalism. Our public appreciates what we do. Many of them are willing, hopefully more soon, are willing to part with their money as well to support investigative journalism. And it remains a privilege to do this job.
And we're very grateful that you do it, Adriaan. Thank you for all of the work that is coming and the many sleepless nights and pizza dinners in your next 2 weeks. We wish you all the best of luck for successful coverage, and thank you for what you said about steering clear of rumors and speculation, but being prepared and using data. Very, very exciting time ahead. I'll be watching closely. Next week, we're back with Peter Pomerantsev, who is chatting to us about his latest book, which looks at, let me get the title of the book right. We're talking about lessons for the EU election from his new book, How to Win an Information War. So that's going to be very interesting. The bumper election year continues. Thank you, Adriaan. Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you next week. Adriaan, go well.
Thank you, Kate, and thanks.